Arthur adjusted his cap as he drove into the small Cotswolds village, his delivery truck rumbling along the cobblestone streets. The sun was just beginning to rise, casting a soft golden glow over the quaint stone cottages and rolling hills. Despite the beauty of the place, there was something oddly timeless about it, as if the village had been untouched by the passage of years. He pulled up to the village square, where the clock tower stood tall. As he stepped out of the truck, he noticed the clock was stuck at 1 minute to midnight. He shook his head, dismissing it as a quaint quirk of an old town. As he unloaded crates of supplies, he observed the villagers going about their morning routines, sweeping doorsteps, opening shop windows, and greeting one another with the same words and smiles. A shiver ran down his spine. Something felt off, but he couldn't quite place it. As he finished unloading, a woman approached him. She was in her mid-20s, with a kind face and a hint of urgency in her eyes. "Excuse me," she said softly. "You're new here, aren't you?" Arthur nodded, slightly wary. "Yes, just making a delivery. I'm Emily," she introduced herself, glancing around nervously. "Please, can we talk for a moment?" Curiosity piqued, Arthur nodded again and followed her to a nearby bench. As they sat, Emily leaned in, her voice barely above a whisper. "We're trapped," she began. "The village, it's caught in a time loop. Everyone repeats the same day over and over, and no one realizes it but me." Arthur frowned, skepticism creeping into his thoughts. "A time loop? That's a bit hard to believe." "I know how it sounds," Emily admitted, pulling out a small notebook. "I've been documenting each day, every event, every interaction. It's always the same. You noticed the clock, didn't you? Stuck at 1 minute to midnight." He had, but he was still skeptical. "And how do you know I'm not part of this loop?" Emily looked at him earnestly. "Because you're not from here. Newcomers can notice the changes, even if it takes them a while. Please, I need your help to figure out what's happening." Arthur hesitated. The villagers moved around them, seemingly oblivious to the conversation. He thought of the odd déjà vu he'd felt since arriving and decided to entertain her idea, at least for now. "All right," he said slowly. "I'll help, but I need to see more to believe this." Emily nodded, relief flooding her features. "Thank you. There's so much more to tell you, but we need to be careful. The villagers don't know, and they might react badly if they find out." As they stood, Arthur glanced around, a sense of unease settling over him. The village, so picturesque and serene, now felt like a carefully constructed illusion. He knew he was stepping into something far beyond his usual routine, but the mystery tugged at him, pulling him deeper into the strange, silent village. As Arthur and Emily walked through the village, she handed him the notebook. The cover was worn, the pages filled with meticulous notes and observations. Arthur flipped through it, seeing the same events described repeatedly. The baker placing fresh loaves in the window, the blacksmith sharpening tools, the village children playing in the square. "It's like a script," Arthur muttered, eyebrows furrowing. Emily nodded. "Exactly, and it always ends the same way. The clock strikes midnight, and then it all resets." They paused outside a small cafe, where an elderly couple sat sipping tea. The scene was picturesque, yet Arthur felt a strange detachment, as if watching actors in a play. He returned the notebook to Emily, a mix of intrigue and disbelief churning within him. "How did you become aware of the loop?" he asked. "It started with little things," Emily explained. "A sense of déjà vu, noticing that nothing ever changed. Then I found this notebook in the attic, from someone who lived here decades ago, who also noticed the loop. It confirmed my suspicions, and I've been documenting ever since." As they continued their walk, Arthur observed the villagers more closely. Their movements were routine, their conversations repetitive. The charm of the village began to fade, replaced by an unsettling stillness. "Have you tried leaving?" Arthur inquired. Emily shook her head. "I have, but I always end up back here when the day resets. It's like an invisible barrier. And the villagers, they seem friendly, but any talk of leaving or change makes them uneasy. That's why they might react badly," Arthur mused. "They're subconsciously protecting the loop." "Possibly," Emily agreed. "But I believe there's a deeper reason. This loop, This curse, it's tied to something in the village's past, something they've forgotten or chosen to ignore. Arthur nodded, beginning to piece together the gravity of the situation. So, we're dealing with a supernatural phenomenon. Have you found any clues about its origins? Emily sighed, her eyes distant. Only hints, old stories, local legends. There's talk of a pact made long ago, but nothing concrete. And then there's the clock. Arthur glanced at the clock tower, the hands frozen at 1 minute to midnight. What about it? It's never moved, Emily said. Not in all the time I've been aware of the loop. It might be a symbol or a key, but I haven't figured it out yet. Arthur felt a chill run through him, the weight of the mystery pressing down. The village, once a charming backdrop, now felt like a cage, trapping its inhabitants in an endless cycle. He looked at Emily, seeing the determination in her eyes. Despite the impossibility of the situation, she had continued to search for answers, alone in her awareness. "All right," he said, his voice firm. "We'll figure this out. There's got to be a way to break the cycle." Emily smiled, a glimmer of hope lighting her face. "Thank you, Arthur. I can't do this alone." As they parted ways, Arthur felt a growing sense of responsibility. The diary, the clock, the villagers, all were pieces of a puzzle he was determined to solve. And as he headed back to his truck, he couldn't shake the feeling that time was running out, even in a place where time had seemingly stopped. The next morning, Arthur met Emily at the village library, a modest stone building with ivy creeping up its walls. Inside, the scent of old books filled the air, and sunlight streamed through dusty windows, casting a warm glow on the wooden shelves. "We need to dig into the village's history," Emily said, guiding Arthur to a section filled with old records and local lore. "There has to be something here that explains the curse." They spent hours poring over brittle pages and faded manuscripts, uncovering fragments of the village's past. Arthur found a leather-bound book that detailed the village's origins, while Emily unearthed a collection of folktales and legends. "Listen to this," Arthur said, reading aloud from the book. "The village was founded in the 1600s, and there's mention of a mysterious benefactor who protected the villagers from a plague in exchange for an unspecified debt." Emily nodded, her eyes scanning the pages of her own find. "And here, in this folktale, it speaks of a dark figure who demanded a payment in time from the villagers. It sounds like the same story, passed down through generations." Arthur leaned back, his mind racing. So, the village made a pact, and now they're paying the price. But why a time loop? Why trap everyone in the same day? Emily's gaze shifted to the window, where the clock tower loomed. Maybe the debt was never fully paid. Perhaps the loop is a way to keep the village in a state of perpetual limbo until the debt is settled. As they delved deeper, strange occurrences began to happen. Books fell from shelves on their own, and whispers seemed to emanate from the dark corners of the library. Arthur and Emily exchanged uneasy glances, aware that their investigation was stirring something ancient and restless. "We need to find more about this benefactor," Arthur suggested. "There must be records of who they were and what exactly they demanded." Emily agreed, but their search yielded only cryptic references and fragmented accounts. The benefactor remained an enigma, shrouded in mystery and fear. The librarian, an elderly woman with sharp eyes and a wary demeanor, approached them. "You two have been digging quite deep," she remarked, her voice tinged with suspicion. "What exactly are you looking for?" Arthur hesitated, but Emily spoke up. "We're trying to understand the village's history, especially the old legends and pacts. Do you know anything about a benefactor who saved the village from a plague?" The librarian's expression hardened. "That's old folklore, best left alone. Some things are meant to be forgotten." "But we're already in the middle of it," Arthur insisted. "The village is stuck in a loop, and we believe it's connected to this old pact." The librarian's eyes widened briefly before she composed herself. "If you insist on pursuing this, be careful. The past has a way of protecting its secrets." With that, she walked away, leaving Arthur and Emily to their thoughts. They gathered their notes and left the library, stepping into the cool evening air. The village was bathed in twilight, and the clock tower's hands still pointed to 1 minute to midnight. "There's more to this," Arthur said, his voice resolute. "We need to find out what really happened and why the loop was created." Emily nodded, determination mirrored in her eyes. "We should check the church records. If there's any place that would hold detailed accounts, it's there." As they made their way to the village church, a sense of foreboding settled over them. The investigation had stirred the village's buried secrets, and they knew that whatever they uncovered next could bring them closer to the truth, or deeper into danger. The church stood on a small hill, its ancient stone walls and stained glass windows bearing silent witness to centuries of village life. Arthur and Emily pushed open the heavy wooden doors, the air inside cool and filled with the faint scent of incense. The dim light filtering through the stained glass cast a kaleidoscope of colors on the stone floor. They approached the vestry, where they hoped to find the parish records. The vicar, an elderly man with a kind face, greeted them with a nod. "How can I assist you?" he asked, his voice gentle yet firm. "We're looking for historical records, specifically from the 1600s, Emily explained. "We believe there might be something in the church's archives that can help us understand the village's past." The vicar's expression grew cautious. "The 1600s? That's a long time ago. Most records from that era are incomplete or missing." Arthur stepped forward. "We've found references to a benefactor who made a pact with the villagers. We need to know more about it." The vicar sighed, his gaze distant. "Ah yes, the old stories. There are some who believe in those tales, though most see them as just that, stories." "Please," Emily pressed. "It's important. We think it's connected to what's happening now." The vicar hesitated, then nodded. "Very well. Follow me." He led them to a small room filled with dusty books and scrolls. As he sifted through the piles, the sound of rustling paper filled the air. Finally, he pulled out a weathered ledger. "This might have what you're looking for." They gathered around as he opened the ledger, revealing faded ink and archaic handwriting. The entry spoke of mundane matters, baptisms, marriages, deaths, until they found a passage mentioning a plague that threatened the village. It recorded the arrival of a mysterious figure who offered protection in exchange for a vow of loyalty and secrecy. "It's vague," Arthur noted, frustration in his voice. "It doesn't explain the nature of the pact or why the village is now trapped." The vicar closed the ledger, his face grave. "Perhaps it's better that way. Some truths are best left buried." Emily shook her head. "We can't leave it at that. The village is suffering because of this unresolved past. We have to find a way to break the curse." The vicar looked at them both, a shadow of fear crossing his face. "You're treading on dangerous ground. The villagers may not want to hear what you find. They cherish their peace, even if it's built on silence." As they left the church, the weight of the vicar's words settled on them. Outside, the village continued its routines, oblivious to the hidden history that bound them. Arthur turned to Emily, his voice low. "We need to be careful. If the villagers react badly, it could make things worse." Emily nodded, her resolve firm. "I know, but we can't stop now. We're getting closer to the truth." As they walked through the village, they noticed subtle changes. Some villagers glanced at them with suspicion, while others avoided eye contact altogether. The once welcoming atmosphere now felt charged with unease, a silent acknowledgement that Arthur and Emily were disrupting the status quo. They reached the edge of the village, where the woods loomed dark and foreboding. Emily paused, looking back at the familiar streets. "There's one place we haven't looked," she said softly. "The old manor house. It's been abandoned for years, but it's said to hold secrets about the village's past." Arthur nodded, feeling a mix of anticipation and dread. "Let's go then. Whatever's happening, we need to see it through." Together, they set off towards the manor, unaware of the deeper mysteries and dangers that awaited them within its crumbling walls. The manor house stood at the far end of the village, half hidden by the encroaching forest. Its once grand facade was now weathered and cracked, ivy crawling up the walls like skeletal fingers. Arthur and Emily approached cautiously, the air thick with the scent of damp earth and decay. They pushed open the creaking door and stepped into the musty darkness. Dust motes danced in the shafts of light streaming through broken windows, and the floorboards groaned under their weight. The atmosphere was oppressive, filled with the whispers of the past. Emily led the way to what appeared to be a study, its walls lined with books and faded portraits. This place belonged to the village elder during the time of the pact, she explained. If there's any record of what truly happened, it should be here. As they searched through the room, Arthur found a hidden compartment in the desk, revealing a bundle of old letters tied with a fraying ribbon. The letters detailed negotiations and correspondences with a mysterious benefactor, confirming the pact and the villagers' agreement to pay an unspecified debt in the future. These letters, they suggest that the villagers knew more than they let on, Arthur said, sifting through the documents. They agreed to something, but the details are deliberately vague. Emily's face paled as she read one of the letters. They knew about the potential consequences, she whispered, but they did it anyway, probably out of desperation. And now we're living those consequences. Suddenly, they heard footsteps outside the study. They turned to see several villagers standing in the doorway, their faces a mix of curiosity and suspicion. Among them was Margaret, the librarian, and William, the blacksmith. "What are you two doing here?" Margaret demanded, her voice edged with unease. Arthur stepped forward, holding up the letters. "We found these. They confirmed the village made a pact with a benefactor, possibly resulting in the time loop. We need to understand what happened and why." William frowned, stepping into the room. "You're saying the stories are true? That we're stuck in some kind of curse?" Emily nodded. "Yes, and it's affecting all of us, even if you don't realize it." Margaret exchanged a glance with William and then spoke, her voice softer. "I knew there was something strange about this place, but most of us have learned to live with it. We don't remember the loop, just the feeling of being trapped." Arthur and Emily shared a look of relief. They had found allies, even if only a few. "We think there's a way to break the curse," Arthur explained, "but we need more information and support." The villagers were silent for a moment, then Margaret nodded. "We'll help you. This village has been our home for generations, but if there's a way to set things right, we should try." As they discussed their next steps, a villager burst into the room, breathless and wide-eyed. "The spirit, it's angry. The clock tower. Something's happening." Arthur and Emily exchanged worried glances. They had stirred the past, and now the present was reacting. They knew they had little time left before the spirit, and whatever forces were holding the village in its grip, responded more violently. With their newfound allies, they set out to the clock tower, the heart of the village and the symbol of its timeless curse. The air was charged with anticipation and fear, as the village seemed to hold its breath, waiting for what would come next. The group hurried to the clock tower, their footsteps echoing in the unnaturally still air. The clock's hands remained fixed at 1 minute to midnight, a silent reminder of the village's frozen existence. As they approached, Arthur noticed a faint glow emanating from the base of the tower, an eerie light that pulsed in time with his heartbeat. "The spirit is reacting to our investigation," Emily whispered. "We need to act quickly." Inside the tower, they found an ancient altar covered in dust and cobwebs. In the center, a large, ornate book lay open, its pages filled with indecipherable symbols and faded ink. Margaret gasped as she recognized some of the symbols from old church manuscripts. "This is a ritual book," she said, tracing the lines with trembling fingers. "It looks like a binding spell, probably meant to seal the pact." Arthur glanced around, noting the tension among the villagers. If the spirit was bound here, then this book might also show us how to release it. Emily nodded, her face set in determination. "We need to perform a counter-ritual, something to unbind the spirit and, hopefully, break the time loop." Margaret began translating the old text, while Arthur and William gathered the necessary items: candles, salt, and herbs from the surrounding countryside. The air grew colder as they worked, the glow from the altar intensifying, casting long shadows across the room. As they prepared the ritual, strange sounds filled the tower, whispers, footsteps, and faint cries. Arthur could feel the presence of something ancient and restless, a force that had been waiting for this moment for centuries. "Are we sure about this?" William asked, his voice wavering. "What if we're unleashing something dangerous?" "We have no choice," Emily replied, her voice firm. "If we do nothing, We're condemning ourselves and future generations to this endless cycle. With everything in place, Margaret began chanting the words from the ritual book, her voice rising and falling in rhythm with the flickering candle flames. The air grew thick with energy, and the ground beneath them seemed to hum. Suddenly, the clock tower shuddered, and a ghostly wail filled the air. The candles flared, casting the room in blinding light. The villagers gasped as the spirit of the benefactor materialized before them, a spectral figure cloaked in shadow. "You dare disturb the pact," the spirit's voice echoed, filled with anger and sorrow. "This village owes a debt that must be paid." Arthur stepped forward, his heart pounding. "The villagers of the past made that pact, not us. We refuse to be held to their bargains. Let us free." The spirit's eyes, cold and ancient, bore into him. "The debt is in time, an endless cycle of suffering. You seek to escape, but you cannot change what has been bound by blood and oath." Margaret continued her chant, the words now a desperate plea. The spirit wavered, its form flickering as if caught between worlds. Emily joined her, raising her voice to match the spirit's cries. "We acknowledge the past," Emily shouted, "but we will not be prisoners of it. Release us, and we will honor your memory, not as a curse, but as a reminder of what was lost." For a moment, time seemed to stand still. The air was charged with tension, the spirit's form shifting and unstable. Then, with a final wail, the spirit dissolved into a blinding light, flooding the room and extinguishing the candles. When the light faded, the clock hands moved. They watched in awe as the clock chimed, the sound echoing across the silent village. Midnight had finally arrived, breaking the loop. As the villagers gathered outside, the air was filled with a sense of liberation and relief. They looked around, seeing the world anew. The weight of the curse lifted from their shoulders. Arthur, Emily, and the others stood by the clock tower, exhausted but triumphant. They had faced the past and emerged victorious, but the full impact of their actions had yet to be seen. As the clock struck midnight, a palpable silence fell over the village. The air, heavy with anticipation, seemed to hold its breath, waiting for something to happen. The villagers gathered around the clock tower, their faces a mix of fear, hope, and curiosity. Suddenly, the ground trembled, and a chilling wind swept through the square. The air shimmered, and the spirit of the benefactor materialized once more, its form more defined and menacing than before. The villagers recoiled, gasping in unison. "You have broken the seal," the spirit intoned, its voice echoing with anger. "But the debt remains. The time loop was a mercy, sparing you from the true cost of the pact." Arthur stepped forward, his heart racing. "What do you mean? What is the true cost?" The spirit's eyes blazed with an otherworldly light. "The village owes me a sacrifice, a soul to bind the curse and ensure the balance. Without it, chaos will reign, and the village will be consumed." Emily, standing beside Arthur, felt a cold dread settle over her. "You can't take another life," she pleaded. "There must be another way." The spirit's gaze turned to her, a flicker of something unreadable in its eyes. "The pact was made in blood, and blood must pay. It is the law of the binding." As the spirit spoke, the villagers murmured in fear and confusion. Margaret and William stepped forward, their faces set with resolve. "We won't let you take anyone," William declared, his voice steady. "We've suffered enough. There has to be another way." The spirit's form wavered, as if struggling against some unseen force. "The balance must be restored," it insisted, though its tone held a note of uncertainty. Margaret glanced at Emily, a silent understanding passing between them. "What if we offer you a memorial?" Margaret suggested. "A way to honor your memory and the lives lost, without taking another life." The spirit hesitated, its form flickering. "A memorial?" "Yes," Emily continued, her voice gaining strength. "A memorial to acknowledge the past, to remind future generations of the pact and its consequences. Let that be the payment, a tribute to your memory and a warning to others." The spirit seemed to consider this, its eyes flickering with an inner turmoil. The wind died down, and the village held its breath, awaiting its response. Finally, the spirit's form softened, its gaze turning somber. "Very well," it said, its voice a whisper. "A memorial will suffice. But remember this, the past cannot be undone. Honor it and learn from it, lest you repeat its mistakes." With those words, the spirit began to dissolve, the spectral light fading. As it disappeared, the villagers felt a collective sigh of relief, the tension in the air dissipating. Arthur and Emily exchanged a look of profound relief, their bodies sagging with the release of tension. The village had been saved, and the spirit appeased. But the weight of the past lingered in the air, a reminder of the cost of forgotten debts. As the villagers dispersed, murmuring among themselves, Arthur and Emily stood by the clock tower, reflecting on the events. The clock, now ticking normally, was a symbol of their victory and the new chapter awaiting the village. "We did it," Emily said softly, her voice tinged with awe. Arthur nodded, a sense of accomplishment washing over him. "Yes, we did. But there's still a lot of work to be done." They knew that the village would need time to heal, to process the revelations and come to terms with the truth of their history. The memorial would be a crucial part of that healing process, a way to honor the past and guide the future. As they walked back through the village, the first light of dawn broke over the horizon, bathing the streets in a warm, golden glow. The long night was over, and a new day had begun. A day free from the shadow of the past, yet deeply connected to its lessons. As the dawn's light fully illuminated the village, a sense of calm settled over the inhabitants. The clock tower's hands moved steadily, marking the passage of time that had been denied them for so long. The villagers, now aware of their past and the broken curse, gathered in the square, their expressions a mix of relief and introspection. Arthur and Emily stood together, observing the scene. The village, no longer trapped in a perpetual loop, seemed to breathe with new life. The spirit's departure had left an indelible mark on everyone, a shared experience that bound them in a newfound solidarity. Margaret, William, and a few other villagers approached Arthur and Emily, gratitude evident in their eyes. "You've given us a chance to move forward," Margaret said, her voice thick with emotion. "We can never thank you enough." Arthur shook his head, a modest smile on his face. "We did this together. It's a fresh start for all of us." The villagers discussed plans for the memorial, agreeing that it should be a place of reflection and remembrance, honoring both the benefactor and the sacrifices made by their ancestors. They envisioned a garden with a stone monument inscribed with the history of the pact, a reminder to never forget the lessons of the past. Emily turned to Arthur, her eyes shining with hope. "It feels surreal, doesn't it? To see everyone coming together, ready to face the future." Arthur nodded, sharing her sentiment. "It does, but it's a good kind of surreal. We've given them a chance to rewrite their story." As the villagers dispersed to begin work on the memorial, Arthur and Emily took a moment to walk through the village, observing the subtle changes in the people and their surroundings. The once stifling atmosphere was replaced with a sense of openness and possibility. They passed by the church, where the vicar stood with a small group, discussing the day's sermon. He nodded at them, a silent acknowledgement of their role in the village's transformation. Further along, children played in the streets, their laughter a testament to the renewed spirit of the community. "Do you think the village will truly change?" Emily asked, her tone contemplative. Arthur considered her question. "Change takes time, but the first step is always the hardest." They faced their past. Now they can shape their future. They reached the edge of the village, where the woods began. The air was fresh, carrying the scent of pine and damp earth. Arthur paused, looking back at the village bathed in morning light. He felt a deep sense of peace, knowing they had done everything they could to set things right. Emily followed his gaze, a soft smile on her lips. "It's beautiful, isn't it? The way the light transforms everything." Arthur nodded, a quiet agreement. "It is. A new day for the village and for us." With the curse lifted and the spirit appeased, the village was free to rebuild and grow. The memorial would serve as a lasting reminder of the cost of forgotten promises and the power of collective memory. The villagers, armed with the truth of their history, could move forward with clarity and purpose. As they turned to leave, Arthur felt a weight lift from his shoulders. He had come to the village as an outsider, but now felt a deep connection to the place and its people. Emily, too, seemed more at ease, her role as a guardian of the village's story reaffirmed. Together, they walked into the future, knowing that the past, while ever present, no longer held them captive. The village, once a silent witness to the passage of time, was now a beacon of hope and renewal, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. In the days following the spirit's departure, the village buzzed with activity as the residents set about creating the memorial. The chosen site was a tranquil garden near the clock tower, where flowers of every color bloomed and birdsong filled the air. The villagers worked together, planting new flowers and clearing the space, their faces alight with a sense of purpose. Margaret and William led the effort, guiding the design of the stone monument that would stand at the garden's center. The monument was a simple yet elegant structure, engraved with an inscription that told the story of the pact, the time loop, and the villagers' journey to break free. It was a tribute to those who had suffered and a pledge to remember and learn from the past. Arthur and Emily watched as the monument was unveiled. A small crowd gathered to witness the moment. The villagers stood in silence, reflecting on the words etched in stone and the weight of the history they now understood. Emily stepped forward, her voice steady as she addressed the crowd. This memorial is not just a marker of the past, but a guide for our future. It reminds us that while we cannot change what happened, we can honor those who came before us by living truthfully and courageously. The villagers nodded, some wiping away tears, others holding their loved ones close. The atmosphere was one of solemnity and hope, a collective acknowledgement of the journey they had undertaken together. After the ceremony, Arthur and Emily walked through the village, noticing the subtle but profound changes in the people and the place. The villagers seemed more vibrant, more engaged with their surroundings and each other. There was a newfound openness, a willingness to discuss the past and its impact on their lives. As they reached the edge of the village, they stopped to rest on a bench overlooking the rolling hills. The sun was setting, casting a warm glow over the landscape, and the air was filled with the scent of blooming flowers. Emily turned to Arthur, her eyes thoughtful. "Do you think the village will continue to change?" Arthur smiled, a sense of contentment settling over him. "Change is inevitable, especially now that they know the truth. But I think they'll embrace it, make it a part of their story." Emily nodded, a soft smile playing on her lips. "I hope so. This place has so much potential, so much beauty. It deserves to be remembered for the right reasons." They sat in comfortable silence, watching as the sky deepened into twilight. The village, once trapped in a cycle of repetition, now stood on the brink of a new beginning. The memorial garden, with its stone monument and vibrant flowers, was a testament to the power of memory and the resilience of the human spirit. As the first stars appeared in the night sky, Arthur felt a deep sense of peace. He had come to the village by chance, but he knew that the experience had changed him in ways he was still discovering. Emily, too, seemed transformed, her role as a historian and guardian of the village's legacy solidified. Together, they had faced the shadows of the past and emerged into the light of a new day. The village, no longer silent, was now a place of renewal and hope, a living reminder that while the past cannot be undone, it can be understood and honored. As they stood to leave, Arthur looked back at the village, its lights twinkling in the distance. He knew that they would return someday, to see how the village and its people had grown and changed. For now, they walked away, content in the knowledge that they had helped to write a new chapter in the village's story. And so, the village continued on, carrying its history with grace and resolve, a beacon of resilience in the quiet countryside. The past was no longer a chain that bound them, but a foundation upon which they could build a brighter future. If you're eager to explore more mysteries and adventures beyond our own world, click on the video appearing on your screen now. Dive into another thrilling sci-fi story from our Sci-Fi Story Vault and continue your voyage into the unknown. Don't forget to subscribe for more tales from the cosmos. The universe is vast, and its stories are waiting for you.